Robert makes light of my technical abilities. I don't imagine why he does that.
Well, it's you're not the only one, that's for sure. But it's good to speak to you, Eric.
Yeah.
We haven't done this in a while. Feels like it was overdue.
Yeah, it has been quite a while, actually.
And when I was in Vancouver in May, I didn't even get to see you. So yeah, it's good to speak to you. I think we got a lot to delve into. Let's start with the high level stuff, as we often do. And I want to ask you. I mean, I just pulled up your note here from last night. I haven't really read the whole thing yet, but I think copper is a great place to start. What the heck do you think is happening or has happened with copper in 2024? We had this incredible rally from February to May, and now we just had an incredible drop. It just almost gave back the entire move. What's your sense of, what's driving copper?
Well, back in April, May, when that rally was going on, I wrote to subscribers that, although I was happy to see it at one level, it was a bit of a head scratcher because there was a very large build in warehouse inventories in China. And of course, China's the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to the copper market. And it was odd. Basically the inventories over there were going up in lockstep with the copper price, which is not normally what you'd expect. I saw a couple of explanations, I guess, if you want to use maybe too strong a word, from a couple of different parties. The main one was that there was some belief that traders in Shanghai were positioning for a big devaluation in the yuan. And of course, if you're looking at a local devaluation, one of the best things to hedge with is commodities as the price in U.S. dollars. And you could have made the argument that some of the gold rally was due to that too. I didn't find that to be that comforting an argument, I guess, because I just couldn't believe that Beijing would do a big yuan devaluation this year. As much as they might like to, they've got two issues. One is they don't want to generate more inflation. The bigger issue is obviously a political one. If China cut the yuan down by 20% in a U.S. election year, that would just be a political shit show. I couldn't see him doing it. And now in the last, pretty much from the start of July, you're seeing a lot of that warehouse inventory leave China. Chinese copper exports, in all forms, have gone through the roof in the last 2 weeks. The increase is really quite remarkable. I think maybe the highest it's ever been. So obviously, whatever reason those guys were holding that copper inventory for, they've decided not to hold it anymore. They're unloading it at a pretty high rate. And I got a feeling a lot of the downside move in copper, other things being equal, is probably done now because the exports did go up quite fast. So they really have brought those inventories down quite a bit just in the space of 2 weeks. So I don't know why they bought the stuff in the first place. Maybe they were betting on a stimulus program that didn't happen. Beijing continues to do this and that to try to stimulate their economy, but you're not seeing the kind of balls to the wall $1 trillion stimulus program, and I don't think you're going to. Beijing just doesn't feel like it can throw that kind of money around, and their growth rate's just not going up. So it may be, if that was the reason all those traders bought copper in Shanghai, they're looking at the economic growth right now and just going like, we're not going to be able to sell this stuff. We got to get it out of here. But they're moving it pretty fast, so I think that problem is going to take care of itself fairly quickly. Maybe there's a little more downside in copper, but medium long term, I'm extremely bullish copper. So I wouldn't be afraid of copper stocks. I'd be cautious, I guess. I certainly wouldn't be aggressive bidding. Let's make sure this is cleared out. But I don't understand why they bought the stuff in the first place. They were hedging against something, or expecting something, whatever it was, it didn't happen. Now they're unloading. I mean, that's pretty much why copper's at the pullback. It's coming out of Shanghai.
Yeah, yeah, that seems pretty clear that China's been a pretty big seller here since probably the end of May.
Yeah.
And they're the marginal buyer and seller in copper. I mean, they drive the price, and that's no secret at all. And I think the theory is right. They may have thought there was going to be a bigger stimulus, and they just tried to get ahead of it, and they were disappointed. And yeah, so then this morning we have this op-ed on by Bill Dudley, the former chairman of the New York Fed, and he's a pretty powerful voice. He's not a current Fed governor or Fed chair at all, but he's a pretty influential voice, and he was the head of the New York Fed for almost 10 years, and he says I changed my mind. The Fed needs to cut rates now, and he talks about this Sahm Rule that's about to be triggered essentially by the rise in the unemployment rate. And basically it's kind of a scary little thing he writes, where basically he says, like, if the Sahm Rule gets triggered, we may have a very sharp acceleration in the unemployment rate that the Fed is not currently anticipating. It's not expecting that at all. But if you look at history, that's what happens. And so the Fed is behind the curve. He's basically saying, no, I don't think that means the Fed's going to cut rates next week. I think that horse has left the barn already. I don't think they can do that unless they want to, incite a panic. But, what's your take on this, situation where suddenly we've got this pivot to a bunch of doves, and the market has basically already started to price in a series of cuts at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I've been, much like Bill Dudley, I guess. I've tended to be a hawk when it comes to rates. Really for the last couple of years, I didn't think inflation was going to come down quite as fast as the market did, and I thought the U.S. economy was strong enough that, I mean, to me it didn't make any sense that I would be cutting rates if I was in Jay Powell's shoes. We are starting to see some weakening lately. I mean, I'm still not convinced on the recession story, but there's no doubt about it. Things have weakened quite a bit. And Claudia, I believe her first name's Claudia. Claudia Sahm Rule is a relatively, it's a relatively recent theory, but it's a pretty powerful one. It's got pretty much 100% predictive track record, and I don't think it has a track record of generating any false signals. It's really a pretty impressive rule, and essentially essentially what the rule says, if 3-month unemployment goes up over 0.5% in the course of 3 months, a recession is pretty much guaranteed. And it's a rule that tends to get triggered early in a rise in unemployment. I believe the smallest increase in unemployment after the Sahm Rule was triggered in the last 50 years was 2%, and I think the average is 3 or 4%. So I mean, that's a lot. Obviously, when you got 4% unemployment, if you get another 3 or 4% unemployment, that's definitely a recession. So I can, maybe the Sahm Rule itself is what has Dudley going, just because its track record is so good, and it is close. I think the last reading was 0.48. So you don't need to see much of a drop in employment or a bump in the unemployment rate to trigger it. The odds of it being triggered at the next non-farm payroll are decent. So I just based on that rule alone, I can see why he's suddenly talking about rate cuts. I mean, I've been a skeptic when it comes to a near-term recession, but I got to give some I got to give some weight to the Sahm Rule just because its track record's so good. It's not something you can ignore.
Yeah, no, his op-ed was convincing. I mean, and coming from him,
Yeah,
he was
he's a
formerly
hawk.
pretty hawkish.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Dudley's normally a hawk. I mean, that was a surprising editorial. It's kind of like, oh, okay, like where'd that come from?
but it's too late to cut next week, don't you think? I mean, if they cut next week, it would be a shock, right?
Yeah, I think. I mean, that's a dangerous place to be if you're running the Fed. I mean, as we all know, the Fed goes out of its way and bends over backwards to telegraph. Central banks never like to surprise the market if they can avoid it, and they're pretty much saying cut in September. So, yeah, I think if they suddenly turn around and did a cut next week, that could really freak traders out. So it could be self-fulfilling, but I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to see a lot more damage in the stock market. I mean, we're getting a pretty good amount of damage here today, but I think we need to see like 2 or 3 more days of this to even have a shot at a cut next week. And the Fed could always signal to 50 basis points in September. But even that would be a little alarming because that would be an admission that they are behind the curve and the economy is decelerating more than they anticipated. But
yeah.
so I guess where I'm getting at is this Goldilocks for gold and silver? Like, I mean, in my mind, the macro backdrop is almost textbook for gold and silver. I mean, like, this is what a gold bug dreams about, is the setup we have right here for the next 6 months, right into year end. Like, not only do we have a Fed that's behind the curve that's going to have to really ease a lot over the next 6 to 12 months, but we have everything else that's going on in the world. And then we have this big election in the US, which has now become even more heated, even more controversial, and highly uncertain, quite frankly. I mean, it's yeah, I don't think anybody can forecast it exactly, and either way, half the country is going to be pissed. So, I mean, is this a perfect setup for gold and silver?
It feels like it to me. I mean, and I'm not traditionally a gold bug. I mean, I'm not a gold bug in the sense that I'm one of these people that thinks gold's got to go to God knows what price. But the setup here, it really is about as good as it gets. I mean, I know after the pullback last week, I saw comments from a few TA type guys and a couple of nervous gold bugs, sort of going, was that? I mean, I guess yes, it was a failed breakout, I suppose. Looking at that and going, so was that it? Was that the top? And I wasn't. I honestly didn't even give that a thought. I mean, I'm pretty convinced we're seeing higher highs and probably quite a few higher highs before this large scale run is over. I probably would have given my head a shake even 3 or 4 months ago, saying to myself, I could see gold going to $2,800, $3,000 during this period through the next 6 to 12 months. But at this point, that wouldn't really surprise me. And that's you're only talking a 20% move. So, I mean, the numbers start looking really big and impressive, but in percentage terms, it's 20%. And with the sort of, like you said, pretty much perfect macro backdrop we've got right now, 20% would not be a surprising move.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that concerns me, is the sort of paranoia that you get from being at this game for 20 years, which I'm sure that you have as well.
Yeah.
Which is like, is it too perfect?
Yeah.
Is it too perfect?
Yeah. How is the market going to screw us around this time? Because it's hard not to. It's hard not to be paranoid, because let's face it, we've had our heads handed to us so many times that getting your head handed to you feels like the default move. So I mean, I'm always looking over my shoulder, but I've never seen a setup as good as we've had this year. Like it's just it just doesn't get any better as a macro setup for gold.
Yeah, and And if the Fed does acknowledge that it is behind the curve and 50 basis points is on the table for September, I think that's just gonna, and we're in a positive area of the year for seasonality in precious metals. You know, usually the month of August is pretty good for gold. So there's a lot to like here. With that being said, let's talk about the juniors. So
Yeah.
our favorite junior mining sector, there's a widening divergence between the senior miners like Newmont and Barrick, which some of them are even making new 52-week highs as we speak today.
Yeah.
And the juniors, so stocks that are under 300, 400 million market cap, and definitely the ones that are under 50 million are pretty unloved.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is, I made a Substack post, which you probably saw, and it was kind of in jest, but there was some truth to it. Sort of showing the calendar of the year in junior mining and how we get this like tax loss selling for like 3 solid months. Normally at the end of the year, we have like a little bit of a lift, sometimes late summer around Labor Day, and then we get this tax loss selling. And you talk to CEOs, why is your stock down 40%? And their favorite answer is it's tax loss selling. It's tax loss selling. Is this year, I mean, are we set up for tax loss selling again this year? Or is what happened in June in Canada kind of brought forward some of that, supply that would normally come into the market in October, because of the tax rate change that happened in Canada? I know a lot of people sold a lot of stocks in June. So, what are your thoughts on that? Is it going to be as bad as it normally is?
I suspect not, because of the tax change. And those of you who aren't Canadians, the capital gains inclusion rate went from 50% to 67%. What that means in practice is that, if you're a top income earner, your tax rate on capital gains went up by about 15-20%. And you're right, there were a lot of people selling to lock gains in ahead of that change, which was kind of mid-June is when it kicked in. And I think, one thing too is that you do get, a lot of tax loss selling at the end of the year. It tends to be in the smaller, less liquid issues, so it has a big impact, even though sometimes the volume isn't that big. Because the big traders I know, I mean, friends of mine that have really, really big accounts, those guys do not wait until November, December. I mean, they're tax loss selling now. I mean, they do it in the summer. They don't do it in the winter. So I do think, and I think you take that and you take the change in capital gains tax. I suspect a lot of that selling has been pulled forward this year. I don't know what it's going to take. It just feels like we're not getting outside money, and even with the gold price where it is, it just feels like there's very little money coming from, people who aren't the usual suspects, if you will. And I'm not sure what it's going to take to change that. Maybe there's some magical gold price that suddenly has people outside the sector buying juniors. God only knows what that would be. We're at 2,400 now, so, which doesn't appear to be doing it. Discoveries always help. I mean, if we could get 2 or 3 discoveries where things just worked and the stock just went up and kept going up, I think a few of those as examples would certainly help when it comes to bringing outside money in, because outside money tends to chase gains. It isn't, you're not talking about people going, I'm going to dig deep and see if I can find the next drill speculation where the drill hole might work out. That's not what outside money does. Outside money chases the stock that's gone from 20 cents to $2 when it's $2. That's just how they're going after the stuff that's getting the headlines. So, and I'm
Yeah.
not seeing that yet. I mean, yeah, there's a few stocks that seem to have that kind of momentum, but man, they're few and far between. There's not many at all.
I think that's a good point. And something I've heard in a couple of different conversations now in the last couple of weeks is that the larger investors who have specific mandates, like maybe their fund has a mandate that they can't buy a company that doesn't have a resource.
Yeah.
It's too risky, right? So you need at least 1 million ounces of gold in resource or gold equivalent if it's silver as well. And so some of those companies have gotten some love, like Vizsla, VZLA is on the NYSE,
Yeah.
and VZLA is up, I think, a little over 50% year to date. Silver is up a little over 20%, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's giving some leverage. So if the junior has a listing in the U.S., they're still performing reasonably well here in 2024. It seems to
Yeah.
be the ones that are only really traded in Canada are the ones that or they're too early stage
Yeah.
for the institutional guys. Let's talk about the news that VZLA put out this morning. We'll go through a few different symbols. I think this PEA, these numbers in the PEA are pretty phenomenal,
Yeah.
quite frankly. What's your take, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, phenomenal is a pretty good word. It's kind of hard to argue with, 1.1 billion US NPV and like 85% or whatever it is IRR using pretty conservative metal prices. I mean, the metal prices they used are about 20% below where it's trading right now. So I mean, using today's silver and gold prices, the NPV5 is probably more like, I don't know, 1.6, something like that. Pretty incredible. I mean, I'm not surprised by the numbers. I mean, I expected the numbers to be incredible. Vizsla's, I've been a big fan of Vizsla from day one, and a huge fan of Panuco. I mean, Panuco was the one project that reminded me of, Silvercrest Las Chispas project, which is another one of those very rare, world-class, great projects that just makes money hand over fist. And Panuco's obviously going to do the same. I mean, I'm quite happy and gratified to see that it's up, 3 or 4% on this news, because especially in the last few years, generally speaking, you don't see stocks go up on the release of economic studies. I mean, there's this belief in the market that the numbers are always going to be priced in an economic study, and it seems like they often are, because you don't usually see stocks go up on the release of like a PEA or a resource, unless it's a real positive surprise or it's just amazing numbers. And of course, Vizsla did put in amazing numbers, but I'm still happy to see it up, not down after a 50% move. So I think that tells us one, how good this news is, which is obvious to anybody that reads it. But I think it's a positive sign that they are drawing in buyers. People did take note of it and kind of went, shit, I'm going to own some of that or own some more of it based on those numbers.
Yeah. So the current market cap is about 500 million American, 670 million or so in Canada. What's the upside that you see left here? I mean, obviously these numbers are spectacular. Like an after-tax payback period of 9 months is almost unheard of. I'm not sure if I've ever seen that before. The NPV 5% rate is 1.14 billion American. So there is a significant gap there still. Is this the sort of project where it could trade at its full NAV essentially?
I think it can. I mean, it's not going to do it overnight, obviously, and the other point that they seem to be trying to make is they're going to try to push this thing hard to get over the finish line as fast as they can. I mean, they're talking 2027, which might not sound fast to non-mining types, but to go from PEA to actual production 3 years is really fast. They're talking about having a pre-fees out in less than a year, and maybe a full feasibility for that matter. I think that this kind of the kind of project that has the kind of extraordinary economics that Panuco does, you can see things trade at NAV. I mean, if you go back and look at Silvercrest, when Silvercrest went into production, I think it was trading at like 1.1 and 1.2 NAV, which kind of shocked me, but I think people were expecting them to be able to, increase the size and increase the mine life, which they haven't done yet. I think Panuca is one of those projects where they will, in fact, be able to do that. There's a lot of vein these guys haven't drilled yet. I wouldn't be that surprised to see them both extend the mine life and maybe even be able to take the throughput up to 5 or 6 from 4. Although I think to do that, I think they need a third, center of mineralization. I mean, underground mining, it's tough to push the production rate. It's not like an open pit where you can go from 5,000 tons a day to 15,000 tons a day. Doing that underground is a real piece of work, and the simplest way to be able to do it would in fact be a third set of working. So, they may have to develop something else to do that, but I wouldn't be shocked if they're able to push both the mine life and the throughput.
And final question about Vizsla, and always a tough one to answer. I mean, are they going to build this? I mean, are these guys going to build this, or is this going to be bought by a major?
I mean, I think in his heart of hearts, Mike Connor doesn't hate the idea of being a mining company CEO, but he's not stupid. I mean, he's a money guy. Craig's the one with the technical background, but he's certainly no stranger to the market either. And I think anybody that's been through a mine startup understands how painful that is. I think if they were made the right offer, I suspect they would take it. Honestly, I'm not, but I just don't know what the right offer is in their heads. I would think it would have to be a pretty big premium to wherever it's trading it to get those guys to pull the trigger and say yes.
Okay, and then Founders Metals. So we'll start with two big winners.
Yeah.
One I've been involved with, one I haven't, and this one is the one I haven't. Founders Metals. So it's a bit earlier stage. Doesn't have a resource yet, as far as I know, but they just keep hitting.
Yeah.
They just keep hitting. I mean, this is like unbelievable. These guys don't seem to miss. Tell us about the latest news and your thoughts on Founders.
Okay, Founders is a stock I'm inordinately fond of, perhaps because it's a 10-bagger for me already. So it actually hit it's hitting another new all-time high as we speak at 250. And Tino is just a fantastic project. I mean, ironically, when I first started covering it and I bought some of their placement after they picked up Antino, I was kind of attracted to a target called Buse, which they just started drilling like a week ago. And the reason I liked that target was Buse is basically in the floor of one of the larger artisanal pits, and when you talk about artisanal mining here, you're not talking two guys with a shovel. I mean, this was mechanical artisanal miners, local guys, but they were they took out large tonnage, and Buse is, and there's 2 or 3 targets like this. This is only one of them. It's basically an intrusive body. It's a tonalite body that's got stockwork veining, that's got gold in it. It's also got some shearing, and the model for this deposit is basically gold hosted in shear zones, similar to some of what you see in the Canadian Shield and in other parts of the Guyana Shield. Buse interested me because there's at least 1 and maybe 2 shears running through this tonalite body, and they can see the tonalite body because that stuff's a little bit too hard for the artisanal guys to deal with. So they would basically mine down to it, mine around it. So you get these big hummocks of tonalite sitting on the bottom of these fairly large pits. So they're drilling that now. I don't know. I know they did a bunch of sampling. I don't know what kind of grades they were getting in the sort of internal shears, if you will. I mean, really what I'm hoping is there's enough of these shears cutting through the tonalite body that they bring up the overall grade. That's one type of thing they're working on. The other one is, and it's typified right now by what's called the Froyo zone. And again, it's contained within a regional shear. The shear the shears are what created the weakness and allowed the fluid flow. Froyo, they've just hit, great drill hole after great drill hole after great drill hole. And I think when they started getting some love from the market, and it's kind of an interesting story because to my mind anyway, there's some institutional guys, but there isn't a lot of newsletters following it that I know of, other than me. And it's not one, like if you went on CEO, it's not a channel where you see like 50 guys there. I mean, average date is like 5 or 6. And it's kind of interesting how quiet it is that way given how it's traded. But Froyo, I think originally when they started hitting stuff there, what really woke me up is these guys seem to have cracked the code. They figured out how to chase these high-grade zones within the shears, which past operators didn't really have a lot of luck doing. They'd hit the odd really good hole, but they couldn't really seem to connect the dots. And these guys really have been able to connect the dots and step out and hit it and hit it and hit it. Like yesterday's, Monday's results, I think the best hole was like 41 meters of 5.5 grams, and that's by no means the best drill hole from Froyo. There's a whole bunch of 30, 40 meter, 10 plus gram holes. And, as I pointed out to subscribers, there was some comments from some people going, I don't know what kind of size potential this has. Well, when you're pulling 30 or 40 meters of 7 or 8 or 10 grams, and the stuff seems to go down to at least 200 or 300 meters, and these are sort of mesothermal systems, there's no particular reason to think it doesn't just keep going to depth. When you can get those kind of grade thicknesses and you start building up strike length, and I think they're probably up to 500 or 600 meters now at Froyo, the ounces add up. I mean, there's room for more ounces at Froyo than I think a lot of people appreciate. I mean, I fully expect Antino is going to be a multi-million ounce project. I mean, I think 5 million ounces plus at Froyo is a very realistic target. I've had a lot of conversations with Colin, the CEO. Colin's got his head on straight. I mean, he doesn't have quite the gift for the gab, but in some ways he does remind me of Chris Taylor. And yes, I don't want to jinx things by making that comparison, but there's some logic to the comparison. And like Chris, Colin understands that mystery is better than history when it comes to this stuff, because there are a lot of people, as soon as they started hitting, screaming for him to do a resource. And I remember calling him and saying, like, tell me you're not doing a resource, Colin. He's like, fuck no, I'm not doing a resource. Why would I do that? Like, that's the last thing I want to do. He said, as long as we're growing the thing, why would I bother doing that? I think, FDR might be another example, because I do think what we're seeing there is accumulation from, large institutions and very large shareholders, very large investors. I think that's who a lot of the buying's coming from. I mean, I know who did the last placement, last $10 million placement. I know who the buyer was. I can't say because it's not public, but it should be public shortly. But that's a very, very large fund, and it's a fund that has a reputation for buying in the market. So I wouldn't be that shocked if some of the recent buying we've seen, because it's by their standards, it's done pretty high volume for the last week or so, and you've seen guys just putting up iceberg bids. I think that's maybe institutional accumulation, and that's part of the reason why it's just trading so well.
Yeah, a couple of points there. Number one is you're right. I mean, it's not a super popular stock on the boards.
Yeah.
And relative to, like, you pull up a 1-year chart, pull up a 2-year chart, I mean, you would think that there would be 100 people on the channel on CEO, and there would be a lot of content available out there. I guess they haven't done a ton of marketing that could partially explain it, but also, do you think it's the country that people just don't like that area of South America? Like, what's the explanation for why this is still only, like, I mean, in the U.S. it's 140 million market cap, and that's not even that much.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether Suriname is an issue. I mean, Suriname. At a general level, I don't think Suriname's an issue. Suriname's a pretty mining-friendly place. I mean, they've actually had a couple of mines start up there in the last few years, and a lot of the majors are in there. Maybe they just don't make much noise about it, but Barrick, Newmont, Anglo, like all those guys are actually in Suriname, fairly big time in a couple of cases, and it's a place that has a reputation for for giving you mining permits. And I mean, if you look at Antino, it's being heavily mined by local artisanal miners who are the vendors of the project. There's some pretty big freaking holes in the ground. So if you're worried about pristine wilderness, that ship sailed a long time ago at Antino. I mean, there's like giant, effectively placer alluvial workings all over the place. And I talked to Colin about the government, and he says, they're quite good. He said they have very good relationships with the government. He said they're very helpful. He said, they're definitely prodding us and cheerleading us, and like, yeah, let's go, like, go for it, bring in more drills, go crazy. He said we're not getting any kind of negative feedback from the locals at all. But maybe for some people, Suriname's an issue, but I don't know why it would be, because it seems like one of the more mining friendly, pro permitting places around. And yeah, they haven't done a lot of marketing. What they do have is, they do have a group of fairly large supporter shareholders in Europe. Some of those guys are friends of mine, and they do have, they do have connections to, and some of them are fairly influential in social media. So if you went on Twitter and search founders, you'd find there's several people arm waving about it there. But in terms of this sort of more traditional marketing, yeah, they don't really seem to be doing any, and it's got a surprisingly small following on CEO, given what the chart looks like. It surprises me.
Yeah, maybe that's because I haven't bought it, Eric. No.
I think that must be it. It's not a gold thing.
All right, so we started with two really good ones, including I think both of those are 10 baggers for you, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to talk about a not so good one, and I'm pulling up your latest note.
Yeah.
Lion 1. The first word in your comment on Lion 1 is "damn it," and then a few lines down is "brutal." The word brutal. So, and then also the word shitty is in there somewhere. So, I mean, what has gone wrong with this one in a short summary of what's not working here? Is this borderline fatal, or can the company save this?
I mean, I think it's salvageable. Lion 1's being involved at this project in Fiji called Tuvatu for, Christ, I don't know, a long time, 15 years anyway. It's run by a guy by the name of Wally Barakoff. I'm not very happy with the company, as you can obviously see. I've known Wally a long time, and I'm a fan of Wally's. Wally's he's one of these guys who doesn't get a lot of love from the better known names, if you will, in the sector. But if you look at Wally's track record, he's got a really successful track record. He's probably got, I don't know, $3 billion worth of development and takeover stories in his resume. And Tuvatu was one where the guy that was CEO originally when it listed is another good friend of mine, a very good geo, and they've developed a fairly impressive high grade resource here. It's narrow veins, so those are never going to be easy, and they decided to go into production without a full feasibility study. That may or may not have been a mistake. I know at the time I questioned Wally about doing that, and he told me, he said, look, we both know how these narrow vein things work. In order to do a feasibility study that's not going to look like crap, I'd have to get this thing to like 1.5 million ounces. And he said, I'm totally comfortable there's 3 or 4 or 5 million ounces there. But he said, you know what it's like with narrow vein mining to add that many ounces to the resource. He said, you're talking hundreds of drill holes. And he said, I'm just going to be financing that stuff at terrible prices. Well, as it turns out, he's financing development at terrible prices. They do have production now. That they started mechanical mining a couple months ago. It was really hand mining before that. They do have production up to, I think they're up to 350, 400 tons a day, which is pretty good because it's a 300-ton mill. So they've got it up to current mill capacity. The next step is to bring the mill up to 500 tons per day. A lot of the infrastructure for that's already there. problem that they've had that as far as I can tell, recoveries have been okay. It's just been great. Like they simply haven't been mining in the higher grade areas. There's an area called the 500 zone, which is a collection of veins, some of which have truly spectacular grades, but they're mining their way towards that, and they probably won't actually be mining in the 500 zone for another, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And the question is, can they run negative cash flow for another 3 or 4 months? I mean, the reason why I'm so pissed is that they got behind in terms of what it was going to cost to get to 500 several months ago. They did a financing on not great terms, way better terms than today's, but not great terms compared to the share price, and they drew down the second and third tranche of a loan they had from Nebari. Those of you that don't know them, Nebari's a financing organization that isn't famous for doing anybody any favors, and the way that their deal was structured, the second and third tranches were quite a bit more expensive than the first, and I know for a fact these guys were not planning to take those tranches down. If you ask Wally now, he'll say, oh yeah, no, that was always the plan, but that was not the plan. The plan was not to draw those down. The fact they had to do it meant it was taking longer than expected to get it into production. They have got through most of the bottlenecks now, so now it's really just a matter of mining to the higher grade stuff. They've gone from a 7 million to a 10 million to a 12 million financing now. I'd like to think that's going to be enough money to get them to the 500 zone, but the problem is, of course, they're just blowing up the float. So the ultimate upside on this stock has gone down quite a bit because they've increased their share count by 70 or 80 million shares in the last 7 or 8 months, and most of those had full warrants attached. So the share structure's gone from not bad to ugly. So I think they'll get over the hump because they seem to have dealt with all the issues with the mill. They seem to have gotten to mechanical underground production. Those two things should be enough to get it there. And Christ, I mean, $12 million should be enough to get them to the 500 zone. But they've just blown the float up so much that the upside is quite small now. And I'm pretty pissed about it. I mean, I basically said in the update that I'm not planning to do it tomorrow, but I'm at the point where I'm looking for an exit because I'm just pissed.
Yeah. So the 500 zone, I mean, the grades are outstanding, and obviously that's where the upside is in this project. But it's about 500 meters deep, and that's why it's called the 500 zone, right? So are they tunneling from surface, or are they able to sort of get lower?
Yeah, there's a couple of declines, and they're basically, I think it'll be spiral down to 500 meters. So it's a fair amount of, there's a fair amount of stoping involved to get from A to B, but they figure they can get there, October, November. And I don't know if they were going to do this simultaneously. I don't think they will now because of cash constraints, but the other thing is to get the tonnage up to get the mill up to 500 tons a day and hopefully be able to exceed that nameplate too. Because, I mean, obviously, there's a fair amount of cost reduction if you can get the production volumes up to 500 or 600 tons. That's the other thing that would help a lot. But up to now, they've been mining a lot of the stuff they've been running through the mill has been development waste and relatively low grade veins that they're mining their way through to get to the better stuff. I mean, I think the average grade over the last 3 or 4 months that they've actually mined has been 2.5, 3 grams, and the average grade of the resource is like 8 or 9. So they need to get into the higher grade stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they've got some incredibly high grade hits, all throughout the deposit. But that 500 zone looks absolutely incredible. But yeah, this is obviously not a great situation for shareholders where there's little margin for error, and we're going deep in an underground mine for the first time.
And honestly, I'm a little. I mean, I think what surprised me the most, given Wally's history and background. I mean, the guy's raised hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, and he has had 2 or 3 deals where he's taken them from $0 to $1 billion takeovers. I'm surprised at how shitty the terms are in the last 2 or 3 financings. I mean, bought deals are always done at a bit of a discount. That's just how they work. But the last three, including the one they announced a few days ago, 20% discount and a full warrant. It's like, Jesus, you guys couldn't do better than that. Like, holy shit. And of course, this is a life financing. Life financing in Canada means there's no hold period on it. It's trading once it's issued.
Mm-hmm.
You give guys a full warrant, and in a broker placement, you get a whole bunch of guys at the brokerage firms, brokers and large clients saying, well, I think I'm just going to play the warrant. So they just sell the stock down to whatever they think the value of the warrant is. So, this is a 37-cent financing. It's trading at like 33. So that tells you guys are valuing the warrants at 5 or 6 cents, and they're just blowing the stock out and basically buying the warrant. So it's pretty ugly trading wise.
Yeah. Well, I hope, just for the sake of the sector and shareholders and you, that they do turn this around. We could use some good news in the sector. I don't want to hog all of Eric's time, so we'll open it up for one or two questions from the audience. If you just have a quick, very concise question for Eric about the junior mining sector or a specific stock, go ahead and ask to speak, and I'll call on you. What about Westhaven, Eric? So I was up in Vancouver. I went to see Shovel Nose a few weeks ago. I got the full tour from Sean Pollard, the CFO. I met with Peter Fischl, the VP of Exploration. They're a little jazzed up about this new subcrop discovery all the way in the southeast of the property, but it hasn't been drilled yet, so they need to do trenching. They need to sort of get better targeting and then drill it. So we'll see. It's really it's a shame to see this stock trade so poorly and sort of come out of favor, but I guess that's what happens when you're not hitting and you lose investors' attention. What's your take on it here?
I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up there. I mean, I like the management team a lot, and I like the project too. I mean, it's not a gigantic resource, but it looks like it's a pretty decent one. The logistics are good, and like you said, the problem they've had is they just reached the edges of the first couple of major zones. So for the last year and a half, anyway, arguably 2 years, they've had relatively few good holes. Most of the holes are report or 5 meters of a gram or something like that, because they're drilling around the edges of these things, and that's just not getting the market excited. I mean, I've kind of had it on hold for probably a year now, and my comment all the way through has been these guys need a new discovery. I mean, they're not going to get the market jacked up drilling around the edges, which they need to do. I mean, to be fair, it's something you need to do to define the zones. The kind of holes those generate is just not going to get people worked up at all. They really need a new discovery on the property, and yeah, they seem pretty jacked up about this new area that does look suspiciously like it's on trend from the main zones, 3 or 4 kilometers away. If they can pull a few really good holes there, I think that would get the market back. But that's what they need. They need a new discovery.
Yeah. It's actually more than 4 kilometers. It's 6.
Right. Okay.
So it's way to the southeast. So yeah, I mean, if they hit what would appear to be vein zone 1 in drill core that had some grade to it, then it would be game on again. So that's sort of the hope here. And yeah, just walking the property, seeing the lay of the land, I feel like this is a gold mine. I feel like it's going to work eventually. The question is when and how much money to get there. It's a great location. They got some really spectacular high grade gold intercepts, but they haven't had much luck in the last year, and that's sort of why the market is so down on them. I do want to ask you about one that's not in your coverage list. Did you see the news from RAMP, RAMP, on the venture? This sort of blind gold discovery where they were looking for nickel and platinum, and they hit gold.
I did, and I owe those guys a phone call. I talked to them, and we agreed that once they got the rest of the holes out, we'd get on Zoom or something, which I haven't done yet. It's less interesting to me because it's trading so well, if you know what I mean. I was viewing it as something where, like, yeah, I wasn't expecting them to get much in the other drill hole, so I was thinking to myself, well, I can kind of be cute here. It probably pulls back to 30, 40 cents, and then, then I talk to these guys, and if it looks like it makes sense, I write a check. And didn't they go and find Eric Sprott, the buggers? So instead of being a 30 or 40 cent stock, it's a 90 or buck stock, which makes it a lot less interesting to me. I'm not sure what to make of it. I mean, I did talk to their VP exploration. It's real. I mean, that high grade intercept they pulled, which is like, I don't know, it's like 7 meters of 60 grams, something really impressive. It's very odd. It just seems to be gold flushed into the intrusive. I asked him whether, I said, is it obvious in the core in the sense that you can see, the structures or the shear or whatever it is that was the fluid pathway? And he's like, honestly, it's not. Even looking at core, it's not that obvious. He said, when you look at the zone, he said, you can find VG once you really look at it. So he said, we're comfortable, it was like a lab here or something, it's real. But he said, yeah, he said there's some stuff, if you squint, maybe it's the zone. And then I said, there isn't really enough here in terms of sulfides or structure or maybe silicification that geophysics is going to help you much. And they don't think so. They're going to try it. I mean, they left the casing in all of these holes, which means they can go back and do downhole. And I think they're going to try 2 or 3 different types of downhole to see if they can find something that's going to see this zone so they can chase it. Failing that, they're going to just have to box that hole. I mean, they'll have to drill 5 or 6 holes around it. Hopefully they hit the zone in a couple of them, and that gives them 3 points, and then they've maybe got a plane. And then, they step it again, and they step it again, and they step it again. That's what they're going to have to do. It's hard to ignore a drill hole that good, but I'm kind of on the fence as to whether I buy some now or I just wait for more drill holes, because they simply don't have any idea where that thing's going. Like, there's no dip, there's no azimuth. With one drill hole, it's a bit of a crapshoot.
Yeah, it's just those grades in a blind discovery that kind of turns everything on its head. Is so interesting, but you're right. It is. We don't have a lot of information.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy to see them do the financing. Really, if I'd been more aggressive, I would have gotten on the phone, because I probably could have taken some of the placement if I wanted it. And it may turn out that I'm going to regret not doing that, because I remember when I talked to them, and they're classic exploration geos. They're believers. They're really gung ho. I remember talking to them, probably a month ago after this discovery, after it had pulled back, and I think they were a little bit frustrated the stock had pulled back, although it was still a huge gain from before the drill hole. And I remember telling them, like, take the money, and they were like, well, we don't want to issue too much stock because it's really tight. And discovery, yada yada yada. I'm like, guys, like, I've seen this a million times. Take the money. Always take the money.
Yeah,
I'm glad they did, and of course they took the money from a guy whose name is going to make the stock trade a lot better just because he's in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they did well, and hopefully they've got something real there. I can't end this without asking you this question. You can take a shot at it or you can pass. What happened in the Yukon and some of this FUD that's going around about First Nations don't want the they want the mining companies to pause now. The Nacho Nyack Dun, which is one of the bigger First Nations in the Yukon, very very important one. The heap leach pad slip happened on their territorial lands, and there's been a lot of negative press. It's been painful to read some of the press on this, and Vic Gold has been largely quiet. I'm not interested so much in your take on Vic Gold. I'm more interested in the territory as a whole. Is the risk real here for companies like Fireweed and Snowline and Banyan? Are they going to have to shut down their summer programs, or what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting like wildly different takes from different companies on this. Companies that have been up there for a while, and that do a lot of, community relations like fireweed, and I think Snowline, I mean Scott Birdall and his dad have been up in the Yukon for a long time. His dad's been up there for like 40 years. They know everybody. Everybody knows them. I think they've got a good reputation, and I think that's going to help a lot. I'm getting, you probably are too. I mean, I'm getting mixed signals about what the band is saying. You saw that release from Cantex a couple of days ago where they were saying these guys have asked us to stop drilling until they decide how they're going to go forward with approvals and stuff. So we're going to stop drilling. You haven't seen that from anybody else. There's been no comment at all from Fireweed. Snowline had a kind of a confusing comment about making some changes without saying what those were. I'm concerned about it. I mean, people that don't know the Yukon, you always think of the Yukon as being, super mining friendly, mining place, Klondike Gold Rush, yada, yada, yada. It's worth remembering that most of the people in the Yukon are, in fact, government employees. The government employee payroll is much, much, much larger than the mining payroll is. And not all of those people are, notwithstanding the fact they're living in Whitehorse or Dawson, they're not necessarily super pro mining. They're up there getting a good government paycheck and wearing their Patagonia and going on winter hikes and stuff, weekend hikes, and they're not necessarily guys who love the idea of big holes in the ground. So, and I have had comments from a couple of guys I've talked to on my list that have projects in the Yukon, and I'm not going to name them, but who were looking at drilling this summer that they've definitely pulled back. And these are pretty experienced geos with a lot of northern experience, and they're not, they're not saying it's over, we're all dead, but they are saying, we want to get the lay of the land, and we want some comfort that we're not going to get, we're not going to get blindsided here. So we're just going to kind of sit back and, maybe not start drilling in 2 weeks like we were planning to. We're just going to wait and see what happens. So yeah, I'm concerned about it. At the end of the day, the bands have a lot of power anywhere in Canada, but they've definitely got a lot of power in the Yukon. And the simple truth is the NYSE undecided, no mining period, paragraph, end of story. Permitting would be virtually impossible. So yeah, it's it's definitely concerning, but I can't read their minds. I don't know. I don't know whether this is just something where they're going to want a few different types of consultation, or whether they're just off the idea, because they weren't in the past. I mean, it's not lost on them that mining provides, far and away the highest paying jobs, and mining companies obviously go out of their way to hire local. So, they weren't against mining. There's certain areas where they've always been against it, but those aren't areas where companies like Fireweed and Snowline are working. I just can't read their minds, but it's something I think, we should be concerned about, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not a super expert on First Nations in Canada. When people ask me, I usually just say I don't know. But from what I've heard, there's something about land use government agreements, and they haven't been given those for 30 years. And this is their chance to sort of force the government's hand to make these land use agreements. And I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but that's what I'm hearing from pretty close to the source there in the Yukon. And so they may have told a couple of companies that are operating projects in particularly sensitive areas to stop. And they may have let some of the other larger companies who have larger, summer spends to just keep going, but please be mindful that we don't want any more bad stuff happening, here this summer.
No,
That's what I'm
may
hearing.
Be true. Yeah, because it varies from band to band. I mean, I think there's 2 or 3 bands that have those agreements in place, but a lot of them, including some of the bigger ones that have, larger land claims, have not had a completion of those agreements where, this area is going to be recreation, this area is going to be mining, this area is going to be off limits unless you're Aboriginal. That stuff has been up in the air for like years ago, right? I mean, that's when the real push to get these agreements in place was done, and in a lot of cases, the final version. And part of this is because there's overlap between bands. I mean, it's different bands claiming the same area, that kind of stuff. So that there are a lot of areas in the Yukon where those land use agreements and definition of what areas could be, you know, industrial, I guess, for lack of a better word, and what areas can't is still a little bit up in the air. I don't think there's anything, I mean, other than obviously the river, you're always careful about that. I don't think there's anything super obvious that's an issue where fireweed is. I don't think snowline is that bad either because they're kind of out in the flats. I don't think there's anything sensitive right there. And both of those companies are, of course, big spends, big employees. You know, they probably both have 50 to 100 Aboriginal employees in the summer, and that's not lost on the band either. But yeah, it would make sense that this would be something that they could use to finally lock that down because it's been an ongoing argument for a long time.
Yeah. All right. Final question, and then I'll let you go. Tell me a stock that you really like here, and maybe something that I don't know that well, or just something that the first thing that pops in your mind. New idea.
Okay. One that's still very cheap and with good reason because they've been not putting out any news. But I just really like the project a lot, and I like the guys that run it, and that's a company called San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo had a bit of a run last year with them drilling one of the targets on their Salvador project. I mean, they got okay results. They weren't spectacular, but they were decent. Not, you know, as we both know in this market, you got to have indecent drill results to get anybody to care. Anything short of that, you get sold, which they did. I really like this project a lot. There is not one. It's a project in Chile called Salvador, and there's not one. There's 3 or 4 targets on it that are really good, and they're not all pie in the sky. 2 of these one of the targets called Tres Amigos. They call it epithermal. It's a funny one because it's basically copper, notwithstanding the fact it's quote unquote epithermal veins. That's being mined by the locals. I think the most recent mining there was like 2-3 years ago. You know, our quote unquote artisanal miners were not, you know, they aren't placer operations. These are guys that put in underground workings. I don't know how much tonnage they took out, but they've been in those workings that are fairly recent, and you know, in the stopes they're sampling like 5, 6, 7% copper across several meters. They've drilled 2 or 3 small drill programs on that target, and they've been getting like, you know, 20 meters of percent and a half, 30 meters of percent. There's probably 3 or 4 kilometers of strike length there, and it kind of fades into another target called Arco de Oro, which is probably the same set of big structures, but Arco de Oro is more of a classic epithermal gold silver vein. And again, a lot of sampling at surface, 10, 20, 30 grams. They've done 2 or 3 tiny drill programs, 2 or 3 holes. But, you know, there's a bunch of multi-meter, multi-gram drill holes there. The other target that their management, their chairman, seems to be particularly fond of and wants to drill first is something called Cerro Blanco. Cerro Blanco is a porphyry target. Classic surface is kind of classic lithocap, quite large, 2 kilometers by maybe 3 kilometers. There's lots of areas where they've been getting, you know, up to 0.5% to 1% copper and 0.5 gram gold. Not, you know, it's not in porphyry. This is just mineralization that's kind of bled through this lithocap. Lithocap itself has got no grade. They haven't been putting out much news. I've been prodding them to bring in some marketing help, which I think they're going to do. What makes this one interesting is the chairman of the company, who I met at PDAC, and I've talked to him several times since. He's very wealthy, successful entrepreneur. That's part of the downside, just because he's so busy. He's got so much shit going on that, you know, he's really not spending as much time on it as I'd like to see, because he's just got so many other businesses going. But when I talked to him in March, and he reiterated this to me recently, he said, you know, I do not not want to be raising money at 6 cents to do a drill program. And I was like, no, I mean, I get that. I don't really want you to either, but I don't see what the alternative is. And he said, well, I think the alternative is that I'll just lend the company $1 million to pay for a couple of drill programs. And I've asked him, recently, like, are you serious about that? And he's like, no, I'm serious about it. I mean, I'll do a non-convertible loan, and hopefully we pull some drill holes to get the market excited, and then we can just go to market and raise money. So the plan, they haven't put out any news recently, but the plan that I'm hearing is they do 3 or 4 holes at the Cerro Blanco. I know they put in the access now. It didn't have access before. I know they built the road access and the pads. They did some IP there. They did some IP at Tres Amigos, which was sort of the copper veins. I believe the IP is done now, so they should be close to being set up to do a couple of drill programs. And I think the signal for people will you see Al, the chairman, do this loan? I think if he does a non-dilutive financing for a couple of drill programs on targets that strong, I think it's a really good punt, personally.
All right, San Lorenzo Gold. Yes, I do actually know that one. Wow, that's pretty cool when you have a CEO who's willing to fund the company.
And he's bought several 100,000 shares in the market recently, and he owns like, I don't even know, 10, 15 million shares. He's the largest shareholder by far. And I don't know everything that he's into. I know he's in oil and gas. I think part of the problem these guys have is but with the exception of Terry, the VP exploration who lives down in Chile, the other guys are all oil and gas guys. They just don't know anybody in the mining sector, and they don't have that network. So I'm trying to get them hooked up with a good marketing team to help them with that, which I'm hoping is going to happen here in the next few days. We'll see.
All right, and just as you're saying that, I'm looking at the latest Fed Fund futures odds, and 10% chance of a 50 basis point rate cut in September, Eric. So that the market is thinking a little bit more along the lines of they're going to go 50, in September instead of cutting, next week.
Yeah, I think we'd probably have a fun autumn in the gold sector if they do that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, thanks for your time.
I'm not sure how fun it would be on Wall Street, but it'd be fun in the gold sector.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate this conversation. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. To get the recording with the timestamps and everything, check out Goldfinger Capital on YouTube. It should be up there by Friday. Cheers.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Robert.
Thank you.